Good evening. It's somehow already 5:31. That snuck up on me. So we're going to call this meeting to order. It's the ACT Committee meeting on May 10th, 2022. It's 5:31 p.m. The committee is myself, Nick Allen, Brian McGinnis, and Patrick McCoy. Item number 2 is comments, suggestions, petitions by residents in attendance regarding items not on the agenda. Very heavily attended tonight. So seeing none, we will move on to our discussion items. Item 3 is our borough manager's report.
Real short and sweet. Happy to announce that we have a director of public works that has accepted the position. As soon as we get those clearances, we expect that person to be on board and in town on May 23rd. So I'll make an announcement, send out an announcement by email and social media when the time's appropriate. So very excited, very well qualified candidate coming in from out of state with a lot of experience and a great personality. So we're really looking forward to working with him. So I'm pleased.
Great, that's exciting. Any comments, concerns, questions? Yeah, definitely. All righty. I think we're good then for item 3B, which is the reapportionment of Westchester's voting wards. And I think I saw an updated map on the screen there.
I'm going to send this link around to all of council after we have this meeting. We just got this polished up in the last 24 hours. This is a proposed redistricting, and so far this is only the fruit of a conversation between myself and Nick Allen. And I want to walk you through how we got to where we got to this map. It consists of 4 changes to the existing map. So I'm just showing you the proposed map, and I'll send also the link to the existing map that you had previously that we've now updated with racial demographic information. So you'll be able to compare the racial composition according to census data, which has its own issues, of before and after, but you'll have to look at both maps to do that. So for the purposes of tonight's discussion, I'm just going to focus on this map and I'll give you a little heads up on how the interface works. And Nick Fink is here tonight, who takes all credit for developing this. This is part of his gigantic skill set. So thanks to Nick and council for supporting Nick's hire to be able to do this work. When you're looking at the interface here, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's not as easy to use on a big screen, but on your screens when you're at home, you can scroll along that table at the bottom and see the total numbers for the population. And then in the left-hand side, you can see the racial composition of each ward. Now, we did summarize all of Ward 2. So you see Ward 2 mentioned 3 times on the left-hand column. Ward 2 is the summary information for 2E and 2W. And 2E and 2W are called out underneath there. So we're not proposing that there be 7 new wards. We're just making the conversation easier because you'd like to see a summary of all the demographics for an entire ward, not separated out by 2E and 2W. Let me go to the map in total and go through with you the changes that Nick and I talked about, and we can continue to have conversations, right? Like Nick and I are not the final decision makers here, obviously. The first thing we were trying to do was balance overall population of the wards. And what was the problematic was this, there were 2 census blocks in this location for Westchester University that accounted for about a total of 3,600 population. There was a census block in the north that involved at least 2 student dormitories, and then the census block in the south included all the other dormitories that are on campus. That population was in this ward, and forgive me, I always forget, is that 5? Over here where my 5, thank you. And so 5, because it had 2,700 students in it, had a smaller proportion of non-students in it. So we sought in this reapportionment to balance the load, so to speak, of student population amongst its adjacent wards 3, 4, and 5. Trying to achieve a balance whereby the average population in the wards didn't deviate more than 10% from the, if you divided the borough's population by 7, if you follow me. The first change was pretty easy because we had a section here of Ward 7, of Ward 1 that was on the west side of High Street, and we had an imbalance, a similar imbalance between Wards 1 and 7, and when you allocate that neighborhood, I don't know exactly which of the blocks it is here, kind of where the arrow is. If you reallocate that population from Ward 7 to 1, it balances both wards, and it makes sense geographically. Boom. Okay, you see how that section was highlighted that Nick just mentioned when we toggle that on and off. So that's the section I'm talking about, moving from Ward 1 to Ward 7, and it's these blocks that are on the west side of High Street. We next turned our attention to balancing this issue in the south of the borough, which there was no easy way to do that because we did not have population statistics that were, we didn't know how to divide up the university because, as I mentioned earlier, there were only 2 census blocks in the university. Let me turn those. Oh, that was voting wards, sorry. So what we did was contact the university and find out the maximum occupancy of all the dormitories on campus, and then do a calculation according to the proportion of that they were filled as of the 2020 census, and then reapportion the numbers to each building. And that's why these lines are drawn this way. This new ward over here captures some of the buildings, and we know what those populations were in 2020 in those buildings, assuming an even distribution of people in the campus area. So the biggest change here is down in the south because, as you recall, the current voting ward here in 5 is proposed to add all of these residencies that are west of New, south of that lines through the road. Can someone help me out? Hemlock, thank you. So that's the big change, would be adding these residences that were formerly in Ward 4 to Ward 5. And that, pardon me, thank you. Thanks for correcting me. Turn that off. Which then creates a deficit here in Ward 3, which is why we proposed extending Ward 3 to the east to capture these blocks, which weren't previously in Ward 3, they were in Ward 4. And then Ward 4 loses that population, but then gains student population to balance things out again. And then the last final move which was a shift of 21 persons from Ward 2 to Ward 3, is because when we looked at the map, it made the numbers work out a little bit better. If this block right here of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 structures were actually in, which would be the new Ward 3, as opposed to where they are today as a part of Ward 2. So this redistricting balances your population. And when we looked, honestly, I haven't looked hard yet at the demographic statistics. I don't have comments to make at tonight's meeting. But I believe it perpetuates a good concentration of non-white voters in wards that are currently have concentrations of non-white voters, so it doesn't dilute minority representation, which was the whole impetus behind the court cases and the ruling that happened in 1987. And if you turn, right, Nick, this one? You turn this on, this is a visual aid that, let me just instruct a little bit here before this one, right? Yep. So each of these dots is not an expression of where someone lives. It's a randomized expression of population in that census block. So if you had a lot of people living in that census block where housing is really dense, you're going to see a lot of dots. And if you add up all the dots, it does indeed add up to the number of population in that census ward. The university is very dense housing because there's high-rise housing units there. So this is a really interesting way to visualize population in the borough, if you're asking me, because in a quick glance, you can see where our density is. You can see, quickly, you can see boundaries because of industrial land use and natural features. Here's the large industrial site. This is interesting because the Wyeth site is very big, right? 23, 24 acres. And there is some housing, I believe, up here on the northern edge. And the dots just represent that population spread out kind of randomly across the whole Wyeth site. But there's nobody living in the middle of the Wyeth site, obviously. And then we chose colors on the dot. And I got to confess, I don't see them really well because I'm red-green colorblind. So the orange, red, and green confuse the heck out of me. But there is concentration of African-American population, obviously here in 2E. And you can also visualize Hispanic and Latino concentration here shared between 6 and the lower part of 7, which was interesting and illustrative to me, as well as a great deal of diversity on the Westchester University campus. So this is the tool we can use to have future conversations about it. This is a proposal. It balances the numbers. It presents a possible way to do this. I need your help to tell me if this is feasible, it makes sense from a local geography neighborhood level, or whether we need to go back to the drawing board on this one.
Great, thank you. And I appreciate all the progress on this. Kind of a nerd about stuff like this, maps. So it's fun to look at the least. But I think that was a pretty good representation of what we were trying to talk about, and especially being the council member from Ward 2. That's very, very important to me that we kind of keep the character of Ward 2 how it is, because historically, I just know the East End has not received the services that they were entitled to receive due to a lack of representation back when council seats were at large. Obviously, I'm not African American, but I feel very strongly that it's my job to advocate for that historic community in every way that I can. So I'm really encouraged that for another decade we're going to keep this practice in place. Really, one of the first stories I heard about the borough and our local government was from Sam Stratton about making this award system, a reality after at-large representation. So this is, I think this makes a ton of sense the way it's laid out right now. I understand why, I guess 5 juts in between 4 and 2. That's like it's like the only thing that I was like, huh, like that's interesting. I don't know if it's bad or not. I just think it's interesting, and I'm kind of wondering if there's a way, to bring 2 and 4 back together. But I don't even know. It might be nice this way because I think I feel like council members in 2 and 4 kind of get that student corridor. It might be good to get a little bit more. Having 3 council members on that student housing corridor might be better, because I do feel like Mr. Stefano and I kind of carry a lot of the load for that. So it's a pro and a con, I feel like. So I think it looks great how it is. Any comments?
I mean, I think this is a very good start. I would like to see the map, the links, and that way I could, look at it myself, and go from there. But hopefully we could get this implemented and then ready for the November election.
Yeah, I mean, 1 and 7 make complete sense to me. The changes in the university, I was wondering how you'd do that. That seems complicated, but it seems like you have the right approach. So no comments.
Any public comment? Great. Thanks, Nick, for the maps. Loved clicking through them. It's nice to meet you finally. Keep hearing about GIS Nick, so it's nice to put a face to a name here. That's great. All right, so I think we're good then for our action items. So item 4A is to approve swapping 2 capital technology projects.
Okay, I don't say this lightly, but this may be the most exciting, important agenda item you will see this month. So this year we were scheduled as part of our capital plan to replace our 2 virtual servers. I have 3 up there, but it's 2.5. Unfortunately, the next generation of the servers that we use have been delayed a year. And so what we decided to do was we were going to replace our firewalls next year. We're just going to swap those 2 projects in a very basic way. Actually, this year is saving us about $1,300. We're excited to do those firewalls. It's going to add some services to the wastewater plants and upgrade the parking garages as well. I did put here, well, quickly, just the new 5-year plan, because I did swap these. So it just kind of gives you a visual of the 5-year plan. There may be some changes to that starting next year because we're doing a big cybersecurity disaster action plan, which may help us justify some additional cybersecurity initiatives in the next couple of years that we would want to add to this capital plan. So any questions about that? We're also going to cover it in the finance meeting too, so they see the capital project change.
It sounds good to me. Any comments or questions?
Not one question.
I think we're
Worked hard
good.
on that.
No questions, but
All right.
that was very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any public comment?
Yes, Mayor. Well, I'm sorry, we're in year 1 as far as this plan goes. It starts with 2022. Yes. A 5-year plan is always kind of in flux. It's kind of like a roadmap. It's constantly changing a little bit. But that's our current 5-year plan in IT.
Great. Yeah, sounds good. I think we can call that a 3-0 recommendation to council. Item 4B is to approve a resolution for the Saturday, September 17th Up on the Roof event, which I'm assuming is how it's always been.
Yeah, this is a process we've engaged in. This is for the Downtown Foundation to run a fundraiser event on the roof of Chestnut Street Garage. It raises funds for the foundation, which works in conjunction with the Greater Westchester Chamber of Commerce and the BID to promote business, civic engagement, and public improvements in town. And it was a good time. I went there last year.
Any issues? Any public comment? All right, we will also call that a 3-0 recommendation then. Action item 4C is the Home Rule Charter Amendment.
So we are at a decision point where I need direction from Borough Council in order to get this, get an ordinance passed and get something on the fall ballot. I believe we're at a point where we have to pass an ordinance in June if we want to make the fall ballot question because of the deadlines we have with making the ballot. And we've been through this a couple of times, and our solicitor's office has worked on this, and there are we've boiled it down to a decision point having to do with there's a decision that has to be made because we were directed to create a process whereby a vacancy on council or in the mayor's office was to be filled as quickly as possible through an elected process that included a primary and general election. In other words, a process where you could circulate petitions, candidates would have ample time, and to do that as quickly as possible. And we ran into some inconsistencies with doing this because in the election code, which governs elections, municipal elections are defined as every other year elections. So if you had a vacancy occur at the off rhythm with that municipal election, the appointment would last longer. So that's the decision you have to make. Does council want a successor elected in an election as soon as possible? Or does the council want the election to go through a primary and regular election in the fall, which means that your appointed person would be in the chair a little bit longer than they would otherwise?
So I have not been able to reconcile some of this language with, I'd be interested to, just as an exercise, to take that PowerPoint that I made like a handful of months ago, and maybe we can meet and try to figure this out and do this sometime between now and next month, but to kind of do like a side by side, or just delete what can't happen, which was the original thing, I guess, and maybe kind of spell out the same way, like more visually, because I feel like we just like kind of have a lot of like verbal vomit with ears and all that fun stuff. It's hard not to. It's a really tough thing to discuss. And I think if we took the time to make a visual where, you know, we can lay out that timeline the same way I did and just say, hey, someone resigns here. This is currently what happens under proposal A. This is what would happen under proposal B. This is what would happen. And I think if we were able to get that like in front of our faces visually, I think that would help a ton, because I'm I've spent a lot of time looking in this issue, and I'm still like a little bit lost in the weeds of it, based on what we've gotten back. Part of that's a function of my being in grad school and getting caught up on that issue. But
I mean, I'm in agreement, but there is one confusing note here on the second email where it states, per the election code, municipal officials cannot be elected at a regular election in even number years. I do find that odd because we did have a municipal election in an even number of years when Mike Gailey was elected in 2016. So I'm not sure if our solicitor knows that, but that is a fact. That's when Mike Gailey was elected. And that was due to the resignation of Brian Abbott. And that was at the general election when both parties had their nominee.
I believe the distinction here is between a regular election and a special election. A special election being an election called to fill a seat whereby the competing parties nominate the candidate, I believe. A regular municipal election is one where there's a municipal primary that the candidates have to go through and win to appear on the general ballot.
In the odd number of years, correct.
I don't know off the top of my head.
It would be in the odd number of years. So I think that this needs to be sorted out, to say the least, as the determination when you have that special election and a regular election. I think we could all agree that when we run, we're running in odd years up here.
Just looked at my calendar. You had an election last year, so yes.
Right, correct. So the thing is, what happens when someone resigns or moves, or, whatever that may be in that even year, we're going to call it a special election. But same thing, what happens if the exact same circumstances can happen in that odd year too. And again, that would be called a special election.
so I personally, I think what would be the most helpful is, like I said, I think it'd be good to make a timeline again. Maybe have the finer terms in the first slide, make some timelines, and then I think we'll be able to have a much more productive conversation than we'll be able to have tonight. So I think it makes sense to just go ahead and table it until
I
we
agree.
have a visual that helps. I'm not in a rush on this personally at all. Like, I don't foresee us having an issue with replacement. So it is a rare thing. That's something that's been brought up. So the idea that we need to rush this is not something that I really subscribe to. So I think we'll be okay to miss a deadline and kick it back another election. I think that's okay. Any other public comment, council comment? Wonderful. Excellent. We're good to move on then to item 4D, which is to approve the April meeting minutes. I personally had no issues.
No.
Okay, we can call those approved then. Is there any other business tonight? Right, we will end right on time at 6 p.m. Thank you.